In the dry autumn of 1887, on the wide Smoky Hill flats of western Kansas, the biggest cattleman in the country let his grass stand thick to the fence line just as his father had for 20 years, and he trusted a shallow creek along his west boundary to stop any fire that the plains could ever throw at him. And a widow's daughter, hired that fall to keep his books and cook for his crew, took a team out on her own and plowed 2 bare furrows down the exposed side of the home pasture, then burned the strip of grass between them clean to black earth on a dead calm evening while every man on the place laughed at her over the wire. They called her the Fire Girl. They said she had made a ruin of good forage for nothing. They said it right up until the afternoon a wall of prairie fire came running down the long draw on a hard south wind and took every ranch in its path to ash, every outfit in that basin but his, and died at her black line for want of one more thing to burn. She had not gone strange in the head. She had read a thing in a dead man's hand that not one of those laughing men had ever had the patience to read. The cattleman was named Harmon Voss, a broad, unhurried man of near 60 who had built the largest cattle outfit on that stretch of the Smoky Hill out of grass and stubbornness. He wore a tan hat gone soft and pale at the crown and a dusty brown work shirt. And he carried himself like a man who had never once in his life been asked to hurry. When he rode the fences of his 3,000 acres in the low autumn light, he looked out over the standing fall grass as another man might look at a full granary. To Harmon Voss, the grass was a bank account. It was feed his herd would never want for. Feed that carried his cattle fat through the hard end of winter when his neighbors were hauling hay and cutting into their calves, and he was not about to drag a plow through good forage to make a bare strip that nothing on earth could graze. His father had ranched the same ground, and his father had said a plain thing that Harmon had built a whole life on. A creek is God's own fire break, he had said, and a man who plows his grass to stop a fire he has never seen is a man scared of his own shadow. There was a creek along the west line, shallow and slow and grown up in willow, and in 20 years no fire had ever crossed it, for the plain reason that in 20 years no fire had ever come. Harmon did not know the difference between a fire break that had held and one that had never once been tested. Few men do until the day it matters. The girl came to him in the last week of August off the westbound stage with 1 carpet bag and a letter of character from a churchwoman 2 counties east. Her name was Ada Rennick, about 25, slight and sun-freckled and fair, with chestnut hair pinned up under a shading straw hat with a faded band, and steady gray-green eyes that took the measure of a place before her mouth said a word. She had come to keep the ranch books, kept badly by a series of men who could rope better than they could cipher, and to cook for the fall crew through the shipping season. Harmon looked at her narrow hands and her plain travel dress, and near about sent her back on the same stage. But the books were 3 seasons behind, and the last cook had quit over an argument about coffee, so he pointed her at the kitchen and the ledger and thought no more about her than a man thinks of a hired hand who will be gone by the first snow. He would learn her name well before the first snow. The whole county would. What Harmon Voss did not know, because he had never once asked her, was where Ada Rennick had grown up and what she had watched happen there. She had come off the Flint Hills to the south. On a small outfit her father had scratched together out of leased ground and hope, and when she was 14, a range fire had come across that country on an autumn wind and taken the whole of it in a single afternoon. She had stood at the top of a rise with her mother and her two younger brothers and watched the barn go, and the sheds go, and the hay go, and then watched the fire run through their little herd where the cattle had bunched and drifted against a fence they could not cross. She had heard a thing that afternoon she was never able to put out of her mind, which was the sound cattle make when the fire reaches them at the wire. Her father had lived and had never been the same, and had died 4 years later of nothing a doctor could name, and Ada had known even then that a fire had killed him just as surely as if it had caught him on the rise beside her. So when she rode out over the Voss home pasture that first week and saw the grass standing thick and dry and unbroken clear to the fence, and saw the long draw running down out of the west straight at the home buildings, she did a thing that no one on that ranch had ever thought to do. She stood at the mouth of that draw one still evening, and she felt how the land breathed, felt the settling evening air come sliding down the low ground toward the house, and she knew, in the plain animal part of her that the fire had taught, that if a blaze ever got up in the west on a south wind, it would come down that draw like water down a trough, and it would be in the home pasture before a single man could get a team hitched. She said as much to Harmon Voss, once, plainly, standing in the yard with the ledger still in her hand. "You want to plow a fire break," she said, "2 furrows down the exposed west side, and burn the grass between them out clean before the dry comes, so that when a fire runs the draw it reaches bare ground and has nothing left to take." Harmon Voss laughed at her. He did not laugh cruelly. He laughed the way a man laughs at a child who has told him the moon is close enough to touch. "Girl," he said, "that grass is money standing in the field. I have run this country 20 years, and I have got a creek that has never let a fire across it yet. I am not about to burn my own feed to bare dirt on the word of a cook who has been here 3 weeks. And that would have been the end of it, except that Ada Rennick had brought a thing with her in the bottom of that carpet bag wrapped in oilcloth that she had carried out of the Flint Hills fire in her own 2 hands when she was 14 years old. It was her dead father Stockman's memorandum book. It was a small, hand-sewn thing, its oilcloth cover gone dark and soft at the corners, its pages filled edge to edge in a cramped pencil hand that pressed hard enough to shine the paper. Into it her father had copied every hard thing he had ever learned about surviving on open grass, and after the fire took everything else. This was the one thing left that had been his. Ada had read it so many times by lamplight that she knew whole pages by heart, but she still opened it slow, like a door to a room where someone used to be. On one of its middle pages, in her father's hand, there was a diagram. 2 long parallel lines, a wagon width apart, running down the edge of a drawn-in pasture, and the strip between them scratched over dark with pencil until the paper near about wore through. Beside it he had written a rule and underlined it twice, so hard the second stroke had torn the page. A fire, he had written, can burn only what it can reach. Take away the feed ahead of time, and you take away the fire. He had not saved his own outfit with it. He had learned it too late, in the ashes, the way most men learn the one thing that would have saved them. But he had written it down for whoever came after, and the one who came after was his daughter, who had carried it 200 miles to a ranch run by a man who thought a creek was enough. That was the rule, and the story is going to make you wait to see it work, just as Ada Rennick had to wait. But hold that one line in your mind through everything the men on that ranch are about to say. Her father had understood it at the cost of everything he owned. Ada meant to understand it at no cost at all. If you have ever kept faith with a thing and older. Wiser hand wrote down and left for you, kept it against a whole crowd that told you to put it away, then you already know why we tell these stories, and you already understand Ada Rennick better than any man on the Voss place did that fall. Stay with her. What the crew was about to laugh at was already drawn on a torn page in her dead father's pencil, and it was exactly right. She did not ask Harmon Voss a second time. She had learned, in the years since the Flint Hills, that a woman who asks twice for a thing she knows to be true only teaches a man that her knowing can be talked out of her. So on a clear morning in the middle of September, when the crew had ridden out to gather the far pastures and there was no one left on the home place but the cook and an old wrangler too stove up to ride, Ada Rennick went to the barn and harnessed the second plow team herself. She was not a big woman, and the sod on the west side had not been broken in 20 years, and it fought her. But she had watched her own father plow, and she set the share and leaned into the handles and walked that team down the exposed side of the pasture at a slow, straight pace, and behind her the earth turned up in a long, dark ribbon against the pale grass. At the south corner she turned the team and came back a wagon width over and cut a second furrow parallel to the first, so that between the two there lay a strip of standing grass hemmed on both sides by bare turned earth. 2 clean furrows running the whole exposed length of that west boundary, with the fall grass still standing thick and gold in the lane between them. The crew came in at dusk and found it, and by the time the coffee was poured, the whole place was laughing. They could not make sense of it. A man plows to plant or to make a road, but he does not cut 2 long, useless furrows down the edge of a pasture and leave a strip of good grass standing between them like a joke. The young hands rode out to look and came back grinning, and Harmon Voss stood in the yard with his hat pushed back, staring at the 2 dark lines cut into his home pasture, and felt the particular anger of a man whose ground has been marked without his leave. "What in the name of sense," he said, "have you done to my west side?" "I have made the outside furrows of a fire break," Ada said. "The plowing is the easy half. The furrows are only there to hold the fire I am going to set. When the grass between them is burned to bare dirt, you will have a strip 40 feet wide down your whole exposed side, with nothing in it a fire can eat." Harmon Voss stared at her. "You mean to set fire to my grass," he said, "on purpose, to keep it from catching fire." "Yes," she said. And that was the whole of the argument on her side, that one word, said level and unafraid, and it made the crew laugh harder than anything had all season. They named her that night. One of the young hands, a loud, good-natured boy who was not cruel but only careless, lifted his cup and called her the Fire Girl, and it stuck the instant it left his mouth, because a good mean name always does. The Fire Girl. The cook so scared of a little grass that she had cut up the boss's pasture with a plow. By the end of the week it had traveled the 14 miles into town, and the cafe men had it and set it over their coffee and laughed, plowing furrows against a fire nobody had ever seen, burning good money to black dirt because a fire had scared her as a child. Ada heard the name and did not answer to it, and did not flinch from it. She had a harder thing than a name to do, and she meant to do it before the dry came, because a fire break burned too late is a fire break that starts the very fire it was meant to stop. She chose a dead calm evening near the end of the month, the air gone heavy and still, no breath of wind in any direction, the smoke of the cook fire standing straight up out of the chimney. That is the only safe time to lay fire to grass on purpose, the still hour between the winds, and Ada had waited for it. She wet down the 2 furrows and the ground beyond with barrels from the creek, set the old wrangler at one end with a wet sack, and took the other, and against every man on the place laughing at her over the wire, she knelt at the north end of the strip and set a match to it. It caught, and it ran, and it did exactly what she had known it would do. Hemmed on both sides by the bare-turned furrows with no wind to throw it, the fire ate straight down the lane between the 2 lines and could go nowhere else, and when it reached the wet south furrow, it lay down and went out. By full dark, it was done. Where the gold strip had stood there was now a wide black lane of bare scorched earth 40 feet across, running the whole exposed length of the home pasture with nothing left in it that any flame could ever cross. The men called it making a ruin of good grass. They stood at the wire the next morning and looked at the long black scar and shook their heads at the waste of it. A week of a good plow team's work and a strip of prime fall forage burned to nothing. And there was a man among the neighbors who did not laugh, and his not laughing was worse than all the laughter, because he was doing arithmetic. His name was Corliss Dietrich, and he ran the outfit east of the Voss line, and he had been watching the overmortgaged Voss ranch as a patient man watches a house whose debt he has heard is heavier than the roof. Dietrich did not want the grass. He wanted the deed. He had learned that the surest way to buy a good ranch cheap is to wait beside it while a proud man makes one bad year worse, and he judged that a cattleman who let a girl plow furrows in his pasture was a cattleman coming apart at the seams. Then the first dry season did not come. That is the part that nearly beat Ada Rennick, because the thing that almost broke her was not disaster. It was good weather. The autumn stayed soft, the rains came kind and on time, and by the middle of the next summer the whole Smoky Hill country stood in the best grass it had seen in a decade. And there, down the west side of the finest grass on the flats, lay Ada Rennick's black line, greening now only at its ragged edges, a long ugly scar of wasted forage cutting through a pasture so lush that the waste of it seemed to shout at every man who rode past. Now the laughing had teeth in it. Now it was not a girl scared of a fire that never came, but a girl who had burned good money to bare dirt in the best grass year in 10, and the strip sat there all that green summer as 40 feet of proof that she had been a fool. Harmon Voss rode the west line and studied the scar through his best pasture and did his own arithmetic. And one evening late in that green summer he knew about, ordered it grassed back over and done with. He found her at the strip at dusk, standing at the edge of the black line with her father's memorandum book open in her 2 hands, not reading it, just holding it, looking out down the draw toward the dark west like a person who sees a thing no one else can. He had come out meaning to tell her the firebreak was finished, that he would drag it and reseed it in the fall and hear no more about it. "It has been 2 years," Harmon said, 2 years of the best grass I ever grew, and that black scar sitting in the middle of it. There has not been a fire. There is not going to be a fire. My father trusted that creek 40 years, and it never failed him. Ada did not argue with him. She only turned the book in her hands and held it out open to the torn page. The 2 pencil lines and the dark scratch strip between them and her father's rule underlined twice hard enough to tear the paper. A fire can only cross what it can feed. "My father trusted good weather, too," she said, "for 14 years. And the 15th year it came down on us in an afternoon, and I stood on a rise and watched it take everything he had and everything he was. A creek stops a fire that crawls. It does not stop a fire that runs before a south wind. I have burned you the one thing that does, while it was calm and safe to burn. If I am wrong, you have lost a strip of grass. If I am right and you drag it, you will have nothing here but a scorch a year too late. She closed the book. Give it one more season. And Harmon Voss, who was a stubborn man but not a stupid one, looked at the torn page in that dead father's hand and at the steady gray-green eyes of the girl his crew called the Fire Girl. And he let the black line stand one more season. He told himself it was cheaper than hiring the dragging. But some part of him had heard the thing in her voice that a man hears once or twice in a life and is a fool to argue with, and he walked back to the house and left a scar where it lay. Here is the thing her father had understood, the thing the whole county was about to be taught in a single afternoon. A grass fire is not a monster, and it is not luck. It lives on one thing only, which is the fuel standing in front of it. The flame in the burning grass reaches out and lights the grass just ahead, and that lights the grass just ahead of it, and so the fire walks itself across a prairie, one blade at a time. On a road, it builds out of the grass itself. Take a wide enough strip of that road away before the fire ever comes, burn it to bare earth while the air is still and safe, and when the running fire arrives, it reaches out for the next fuel and finds only ground, and it has nowhere to send itself, and it starves. It cannot leap a clean 40-foot break, because there is nothing in the gap to carry it. It comes to the black line and lies down and dies. That is all a plowed and burned fire guard is. It is not magic. It is a road pulled up before the fire can walk it, and her father had drawn it on a torn page in pencil, and the cafe men had laughed at it for 2 years. The third autumn came in dry. It came in dry, and it kept drying, a rainless September that cured the whole basin's grass to tinder, and 40 miles west of the Voss line. On an afternoon of hard south wind, a dry lightning storm walked across the high plains, and one bolt of it came down in a pasture that had not seen rain in 6 weeks. Corliss Dietrich saw it from his own east line, and told the story after in a voice that had gone quiet for good. He saw the smoke stand up in the west, and then he saw it start to run, low and fast and copper-lit under the falling sun, a rolling brown-gray wall with a bright orange edge underneath, moving along the ground faster than a horse could carry a man. It came down the long draw on the south wind, just as she had said it would. And it took every outfit in its path, grass and sheds and haystacks in a single pass, and it took the cattle where they had bunched and drifted against the fences they could not cross. Dietrich stood on his rise and could do nothing but watch it come, and he understood, too late, that he had wanted to buy the one ranch on the flats that was not going to burn. Because when the fire reached the Voss home pasture, it came to the black line first. It ran down the draw full and roaring and hit the wide bare scorched lane, and it reached out for the next grass to light as it had reached out for 40 miles, and there was nothing there. There was bare earth and turned furrows, and nothing standing in 40 feet that a flame could take. And the great running fire came to Ada Rennick's black line and lay down and died along it, foot by foot, dark by dark, until there was only smoke drifting off scorched dirt. On the far side of that line, the home pasture stood green and whole, the cabin standing, the bedded herd standing, not one head lost, while the whole basin behind it went to ash on the wind. Harmon Voss stood at the wire on the green side and watched the fire he had trusted a creek to stop die in the dirt of a line he had nearly dragged under, and he took his hat off, and he did not say one word. Beside him, the young hand who had first hung that name on her stood white as the ash coming down on them both. "I named her that," the boy said. "Lo, the whole county's got it off me." "Then you can be the first to bury it," Harmon said. "Go find her. Tell her the black line held. And do not ever say the other again." He said his own words later, at the stockmen's meeting in town, with the whole county in the room and every cafe man who had laughed sitting in front of him. He did not send Ada up to speak. It was not hers to prove. He stood up himself, a broad old man turning his soft tan hat in his hands, and he read her father's rule off the torn page aloud to the room. "A fire can only cross what it can feed. I ran this country 20 years on my father's word and a shallow creek," he said. "And a girl I hired to cook and keep my books read a dead man's pencil, and plowed and burned one black line. And every one of us laughed at her, and I laughed loudest. The day the prairie ran, that line was the only reason I still have a ranch, a herd, and a roof. I called it ruining good forage. I was wrong. And I do not ever want to hear the words Fire Girl said on these flats again, from any man, in any tone. And no man said them. By the next spring, there was a plowed and burned fire guard around every home pasture in the county, and Corliss Dietrich, who never got his cheap ranch, plowed the widest one of all. Harmon Voss deeded Ada a share of the outfit that fall, and married her the spring after that, not out of debt, but out of the plain, slow certainty of a man who had finally learned to trust the one who could read the wind and the ground. And the memorandum book, its oilcloth soft and dark at the corners, went up onto the shelf over the kitchen table. Its torn page kept flat and readable for the next dry year, and the one after that for as long as grass grew on the smoky hill and any hand there had the patience to read it. If you have ever kept faith with a thing an older, wiser hand left you, and held it against a whole crowd, tell us in the comments about the one you kept. And if you had been standing at that wire the first dead calm evening, watching a young woman set fire to good grass on purpose against every man laughing at her, would you have laughed with them? Or would you have gone and asked her what the dead man's book said?